She stood right there at my Christmas table and said, "Can we just order pizza? Her food's basically untouchable." Then she laughed like it was a joke. Everyone else laughed too. I didn't. I spent 2 days preparing that meal. I stayed up until midnight basting the turkey and hand-rolling pie crust. I was proud of it until she threw her words at me like it was trash. So the next day, I took the whole family out to lunch. She had no idea where we were going, and when we walked into the restaurant, the staff smiled and said, "Welcome back, madam." That's when her face changed, because that wasn't just any restaurant. That was mine, and I was done being quiet. My name is Clara Whitmore. I'm 58 years old, a retired school teacher, a wife of 34 years, and a mom of 2 grown kids. But if you asked me who I really am, I'd say this: I'm someone who shows love through food. Cooking isn't just a hobby for me, it's how I care for people. Every holiday, every birthday, every little family moment, you'll find me in the kitchen, humming along to old jazz records and stirring something warm on the stove. This Christmas, I wanted to make it special. My son Lucas and his wife Tessa had just moved back to town after 5 years in New York. It was going to be their first Christmas back home, and I was thrilled. I spent the whole week planning the menu: roast turkey with herb butter, garlic mashed potatoes, my mama's sweet potato casserole, and my famous pecan pie that's won ribbons at the county fair twice. Christmas morning was perfect. Snow outside, carols on the radio, cinnamon in the air. My husband Tom brought in more firewood. My daughter Emily helped me glaze the ham. And then, the doorbell rang. Lucas walked in with a big smile, and Lily, their 6-year-old daughter, jumped into my arms yelling, "Grandma!" Tessa followed behind them. She looked beautiful, as always. Hair done, nails perfect, wearing a white coat I could never afford in 3 lifetimes. She gave me that polite smile she always does, like someone shaking hands with a stranger. "Smells festive," she said, sniffing the air like she'd just walked into a candle shop. I ignored it. I was just happy they were here at noon. I brought out the appetizers: deviled eggs, stuffed mushrooms, baked brie with cranberry, and laid them across the table like jewels. That's when I heard her whisper to Lucas, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Still doing this whole Southern comfort thing? Feels like we stepped into a time capsule." I looked over. Lucas gave a nervous laugh. No one said anything. My smile stayed frozen in place. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was just her way, that she didn't mean anything by it. But something in my chest started to tighten, and I had a feeling this meal wasn't going to go the way I hoped. By the time we sat down for Christmas dinner, I was already on edge. I'd worked hard to set the table just right. Every napkin was folded into a little Christmas tree. The centerpiece was fresh pine and berries, and my grandmother's china gleamed under the lights. It was the kind of table that made you want to take a picture before you sat down. But when Tessa walked in, she gave it one glance and said, "Wow, this is a lot." Then she pulled out her phone and snapped a photo, not because she liked it, but to send to someone else with a little smirk. I saw it. I saw everything. Still, I held on to my hope. Maybe once she tasted the food, she'd see how much love I'd put into it. Maybe she'd finally stop treating me like someone stuck in the past. I stood at the head of the table and invited everyone to dig in. Tom served the turkey. Emily poured the wine. Lily grabbed a roll with both hands like it was a treasure. And Tessa, she poked at the sweet potatoes with the edge of her fork, leaned toward Lucas, and said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "Is this marshmallow? Seriously?" Lucas gave her a look, like maybe she should tone it down, but he didn't say anything. I tried to play it off. "It's a family recipe," I said, smiling. "My mom used to make it every year." Tessa didn't even look at me. She muttered, pushing the dish to the side. It didn't stop there. When I passed her the gravy boat, she asked, "Is this canned or homemade?" And before I could answer, She turned to Emily and whispered, "My stomach's already nervous." The worst part was that no one stood up for me. Not Tom. Not Lucas. Not even Emily, who usually can't stand Tessa's attitude. Everyone just kept eating like they didn't hear a thing. And then it happened. I brought out the pecan pie. Warm, golden, flaky. The smell alone was enough to make you close your eyes. I placed it in the center of the table with pride. Tessa looked at it and laughed. Not a little giggle, a full-on laugh. "Okay," she said. "Can we be honest for a second? This is a lot. I mean, it's 2024. Who still eats like this? Clara, you should open a food museum." Then she turned to the group and said, "Seriously, you guys, if anyone wants real food, we can just order pizza or something. This stuff's basically untouchable." She said that right there at my table on Christmas, after I spent hours on my feet and days preparing a meal with every ounce of love I had. I felt the room go quiet. My chest tightened. I looked around, hoping someone would say something. Anything. But no one did. Lucas gave her a quick "Tessa, come on," but it didn't have any weight. Emily looked down at her plate. Even Tom just cleared his throat and took another bite. I didn't say a word. I stood there, nodding, like it didn't bother me. Like I hadn't just been slapped across the face in front of my entire family. I sat down. I tried to eat, but nothing tasted right anymore. My hands were shaking. I couldn't even hold my fork steady. And then Lily, sweet Lily, looked up at me and said, "Grandma, why doesn't Mommy like your pie?" That did it. I felt something in me crack, just a little. I excused myself from the table, walked into the laundry room, and sat down on the washer. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there, staring at the floor, feeling so small. It wasn't just the food. It wasn't just the comments. It was the way she made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was something to be laughed at, like everything I cared about was silly and embarrassing. And I was tired. Tired of being quiet. Tired of swallowing it. Tired of pretending it didn't matter. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone, looking at the half-eaten pie and the cold mashed potatoes. My hands were still stained with cinnamon and flour, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't even going to defend myself. I was going to show her. Not out of spite, but because sometimes the best way to deal with arrogance is to let truth speak louder than words. And I had just the plan to do it. After everyone went to bed that night, I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea that I didn't even want. The house was quiet. You could still smell the cinnamon and roast turkey lingering in the air, but the warmth of the day had disappeared. I stared at the table, still cluttered with dishes no one had helped clear. The pie was untouched. Her words kept circling in my head like a bad song you can't turn off. Untouchable. Order pizza. Food museum. I had taken her sarcasm before. She'd always had a sharp tongue. But this mocking me in front of my family on Christmas, this was different. It was cruel. And what hurt most was that no one stood up for me. Not my son. Not even my husband. I'd never felt so invisible at my own table. But I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was done shrinking myself just to keep the peace. That's when the idea hit me. I stood up, went to my bedroom, and opened the drawer where I kept an old leather notebook. Inside was the number to my restaurant La Lumiere and the personal cell of my Mactor D. Marco. Most people in my life, including my daughter-in-law, had no idea I owned a restaurant. I kept that part of my life private on purpose. It was something I built quietly after I retired from teaching. A dream I made real with years of savings and a business partner I trusted. La Lumiere was nothing like my cozy southern cooking at home. It was fine dining, white linens, hand-painted plates, seasonal tasting menus. It had made the city's top 10 list 5 years in a row. People proposed there. Celebrities dined there when they passed through. I rarely visited anymore, but every detail of it still reflected me, from the wine list to the signature dessert. I developed myself. I picked up the phone and dialed Marco. He answered after the second ring. Clara, is everything all right? I need a private dining room tomorrow, I said, keeping my voice calm. Lunch. 8 people. Can you make it happen? For you? Absolutely. Is this a special occasion? Let's just say it's personal. We arranged the details in less than 5 minutes. Marco always was efficient. I asked him to prepare a custom chef's tasting menu with wine pairings. I told him I wanted the full treatment, white glove service, tableside presentation, the works. Then I hung up, placed the phone gently on the nightstand, and finally exhaled. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I smiled through breakfast, helped Lily with her new toy set, and even made coffee for Tessa and Lucas. No one noticed anything was different when I casually mentioned over breakfast that I'd made a lunch reservation for all of us as a little post-Christmas treat. Tessa raised an eyebrow. Oh, where? She asked, stirring her coffee. It's a surprise, I said, setting down a plate of croissants I had no intention of eating. Something a little different. She gave Lucas a look. Well, as long as it's not another potluck or buffet, I'm in. I smiled and said nothing. We left the house around 11:30. I had called for a private car to pick us up. I wanted the full experience, not just for her, but for everyone. Tom looked confused but pleased. Emily was curious, and Lily was just excited to ride in a fancy car. As we pulled into the city and turned onto the tree-lined boulevard, where La Lumiere sat, I saw Tessa glance out the window. Wait, she said, sitting up straighter. Isn't this? She didn't finish the sentence before the car stopped in front of the restaurant's entrance. A doorman in a dark suit opened the car door and greeted us with a warm smile. Welcome to La Lumiere. Tessa blinked. We're eating here. Lucas looked stunned. Mom, how did you get a reservation? This place books out months in advance. I simply said, I know someone. We stepped inside, and the host immediately smiled and walked toward us. Madam Whitmore, he said with a small bow. Welcome back. We have your private dining room ready. Chef has already begun preparing the tasting menu. That was the moment Tessa froze. She looked at me like she was trying to do the math in her head. I saw her eyes dart to Lucas, then to the host, then back to me. You come here a lot? She asked slowly. I looked her straight in the eye and said, You could say that. We followed the host through the restaurant past glittering chandeliers, soft jazz playing in the background, polished wood floors that gleamed under the winter light. The dining room was already set. Every glass was sparkling. Every plate was placed with precision. Tessa didn't say a word as we sat down. Not one sarcastic comment. Not one smug grin. I leaned back in my chair, folded my napkin over my lap, and smiled. Because the real feast was just about to begin. The moment we stepped into the private dining room, the mood shifted. You could feel it in the air, like the energy in a theater right before the curtain rises. The room was soft lit with golden sconces on the walls, a crystal chandelier overhead, and a long mahogany table dressed in flawless white linens. Fresh cut flowers sat at the center, their scent just faint enough not to compete with the food. No one said a word, not even Tessa. Marco appeared at my side with a smile that was equal parts professional and personal. Madam Whitmore, he said, bowing slightly. The chef is ready to begin when you are. Would you like to start with champagne? I nodded, calm as ever. Please. He turned to the others and said, Welcome. We'll be serving our winter tasting menu today. 8 courses, each paired with wine. Please relax. Everything will be taken care of. Tessa looked like she was trying to keep up. Her polite smile had faded into something closer to confusion. She kept glancing around the room, like she was trying to figure out the catch. I saw her lean over and whisper something to Lucas, but I didn't care what it was. My focus was on The moment the first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche served on a spoon, smoked salmon with cream flaky, and lemon zest, garnished with microgreens. Small, beautiful, intentional. Tessa sniffed it, hesitated, and then pushed the spoon gently away from her plate. Not my thing, she muttered. Marco, without missing a beat, said, the chef designed each dish personally for Madame Whitmore. These are her favorites. Tessa looked at me, eyebrows raised. Your favorites? I smiled. I helped develop most of this menu. Years ago, when we first opened. Her face froze. Wait, what? La Lumiere, I said casually, lifting. My champagne glass has been mine since 2010. Everyone stared. Tom nearly choked on his drink. Emily dropped her fork. Lucas's jaw actually dropped. Tessa blinked hard. You own this place. Yes, I said, letting the truth settle into the silence. I co-founded it with a friend after I retired. I handled the creative side, the menu, the style, the vibe. I used to come in twice a week, back when we were building it up. Now I just check in from time to time. Marco runs a tight ship. Marco, still standing nearby, gave me a small, respectful nod. You could hear the tension in the air. The same woman who had mocked my cooking 24 hours ago was now sitting in a 5-star restaurant that I not only designed but built. Tessa didn't touch the next 3 courses. She didn't say much either. Every time a dish was placed in front of her, the server would mention that it was one of Madame Whitmore's signatures. From the truffle risotto to the seared duck breast with orange glaze, every detail reminded her that the food she dismissed at home was part of something much bigger. At one point, she asked for a vegetarian option for the 5th course, mostly to avoid eating what was served. But the staff kindly replied, of course. Though that particular recipe is very special to Madame Whitmore, it's one of her oldest creations. By the time dessert arrived, lavender creme brulee with candied pistachios, Tessa was no longer trying to play it cool. She sat quietly, eyes cast down, her spoon untouched. I could tell she wasn't just embarrassed. She was uncomfortable in a way she hadn't expected. This wasn't a dramatic public shaming. No one yelled. No one called her out. The food did. All the talking, the atmosphere, the service, the respect I was shown, it all painted a picture that her words had tried to erase the night before. Lucas looked at me with something like wonder in his eyes. Why didn't you ever tell us? I didn't think it mattered, I said. I cook at home because I love feeding my family, not to impress anyone. But after yesterday, I guess I needed to remind myself that what I do has value. Emily smiled from across the table. This is incredible, Mom. Really. Even Tom, who usually hates surprises, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Tessa finally spoke. Her voice was small. I didn't know. I met her eyes. No, you didn't. And that's okay. Now you do. She looked like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. That silence was enough. After the final course, the staff brought out little gift boxes for everyone, truffles, macarons, and handwritten cards thanking them for dining. Tessa held hers like it was a puzzle. We left the restaurant just as the sun began to set. Snow had started to fall lightly, making the streets sparkle. As we stepped back into the car, I felt something in my chest I hadn't felt the day before. Peace. I didn't need to defend my cooking. I didn't need to argue or yell. I just needed her to see who I really was, and what I was capable of. She ate nothing at that table, but she sure did eat her words. The drive home from La Lumiere was quiet, peaceful, even. No one said much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was thoughtful. Everyone was digesting more than just food. Tessa stared out the window for most of the ride. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest, and her jaw was clenched the way it always was when she was holding something in. But this time, there was no smugness, no snide remarks, just silence. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat with a chocolate truffle still wrapped in her hand. Lucas sat beside her, occasionally glancing at me like he had something to say, but wasn't sure how to say it. And that was okay. I wasn't in a rush to force anything. I'd said everything I needed to without saying much at all. When we got home, everyone went their separate ways. Emily and Tom brought in the leftovers from the restaurant. Yes, there were leftovers, and helped me tuck them into the fridge. Tessa went straight to the guest room, without a word. The next morning, the air felt different, softer. I was up early as always, making coffee, scrambling eggs, and slicing fruit for breakfast. I didn't know if anyone would come down hungry, but old habits die hard. Around 8 o'clock, Lucas walked in, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to when he was a teenager about to say something serious. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. I had no idea, Mom, about the restaurant. That's amazing. I smiled but kept my hands busy. It was never something I needed to bring up. Not unless it mattered. It matters, he said. It really does. He paused. Tessa feels pretty awful, by the way. I nodded, but I didn't reply right away. I wasn't interested in making her feel awful. I just wanted her to see me clearly for once. About 20 minutes later, Tessa came into the kitchen. No makeup, hair pulled back, wearing one of Lucas's old sweatshirts. She looked smaller somehow, like she had left some of her armor behind. She walked up to me slowly, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look guarded. She looked real. Clara, she said, her voice quiet. Can I talk to you? I turned to face her, still holding the dish towel in my hand. Of course. She hesitated, then said, I was wrong. About yesterday. About a lot of things. I said nothing, letting her continue. I guess I thought your cooking was old-fashioned or simple, or, I don't know. I've always been a little judgmental. I've made jokes I shouldn't have. But what you did yesterday at the restaurant, it really opened my eyes. She let out a breath. You didn't embarrass me. You didn't yell. You didn't say a word. You just let me see who you are. And I get it now. I really do. You're not just someone who cooks. You're someone who builds, creates, loves with your hands. I didn't understand that before. I let her words sink in. Then I said, Tessa, it was never about the food. It was about feeling respected. I work hard to care for this family in the ways I know how. And when you made fun of that, it hurt. More than you probably realized. She nodded. I see that now. And I'm sorry. It was a simple apology. Honest. Unpolished. The kind that actually means something. From that day forward, something shifted between us. Slowly, quietly, but permanently. The next time we had dinner together, she asked if she could help in the kitchen. At first, it was just setting the table. Then she started asking questions about recipes. She even wrote some down when Easter came around. She made the green bean casserole herself. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next Christmas, she brought a side dish, cranberry orange stuffing she'd tested 3 times to make sure it didn't taste like cardboard. When guests complimented it, she smiled and said, Clara helped me tweak the flavors. She still had her sharp edges, but now there was respect in the way she looked at me. Genuine respect. One evening, months later, we were having coffee on the back porch. Just the two of us. She turned to me and said, You know, I used to think strength meant being the smartest, the quickest, the loudest. But that day at La Lumiere, you showed me something else. You showed me what real strength looks like. Quiet, solid, unshakable. I didn't need to hear it, but it felt good. Looking back, I didn't set out to prove a point or get revenge. That was never the goal. I just wanted her to understand that kindness isn't weakness, and tradition isn't ignorance. That behind every dish I make is a lifetime of love, effort, and pride. And that sometimes, when people mock what they don't understand, the best thing you can do is let your truth shine so brightly. They have no choice but to see it. She didn't. eat my food that Christmas. But she did eat her words. And in the end, that was enough.